Well, ChanManV here, and we're doing a Value Town interview with two members of Team 5, or the Hearthstone team from Blizzard. We've got Dean Ayala, who's a balance designer, as well as Derek Sakamoto, who's a UI designer. Thanks for doing this interview today, guys.
Sure. It's awesome to be here. BlizzCon's awesome. So yeah.
You gotta hand over the.
Yeah, so.
Okay, but I have a few questions for you guys. We have this announcement this week from you that a new expansion's coming out, League of Explorers, which we're really excited about getting a chance to play. Actually, I played a little bit of it yesterday, trying out some of the new cards. But I want to start off with talking a little bit about pre-League of Explorer and getting your thoughts on things. The community, at least the vocal community, had some negative feedback, leading up to the expansion, and a lot of it had to do with the current meta, or at least the post-patron meta.
Right.
And I wanted to hear it from you guys. Was there any concern with the meta leading up to League of Explorers?
I think towards the end. Do you want me to hold it?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Towards the end of any cycle, basically, adventure cycle or the expansion cycle. I think people you start to see sort of the same stuff. Like people start to figure things out, and I mean that's really what the announcements are about. Like releasing 45 new cards into the meta and having people play new fun stuff. So yeah, sure. I mean we're always concerned that things are getting too stale, or things like you keep saying the same things every time you queue up. And I mean that's what this is about. So hopefully League of Explorers will inspire people to have a lot of new and interesting decks, and you'll queue up and you'll see fun stuff.
Okay, great. So with the Warsong change, there was obviously a lot of the talk, or the kind of negativity came with that change. A lot of people wanted it because it was it nerfed Patron, of course, but there was some pushback, I think, from the arena community or arena players that there didn't seem like the change didn't seem to maybe look out for the arena players, given that I think they wanted the body to change, basically. Did you guys think about arena from that standpoint? And can you maybe explain the change a little bit more from the standpoint of arena?
Sure. Really, we wanted to just make the best change for Warsong Commander for that specific deck. And Warsong Commander, we also wanted to leave it so it's a build around for charge creatures, and we wanted basically the card to look as similar to what it was previously. It's dangerous, I think, because I mean that's not really a mechanic that we necessarily liked a lot. Because I mean, when you're dying from a lot of charge creatures in hand, it's not exactly, I think, the most fun way to play Hearthstone. So as far as arena warriors go, I think there's lots of ways to address increasing the power level of that class, or so you see that class more in arena. And I think that we're doing that with League of Explorers. We decided to introduce some higher power level common cards than you see in some of the other classes. So we are aware of that. I think with Warsong Commander, we really just wanted to make the best change for Warsong Commander, because we've already changed Warsong Commander, and we don't want to have to go back and make further changes to it. So I think it was the right change for that specific card, and we are aware of Warriors not being played as much in Arena, so we addressed that through League of Explorers rather than through Warsong Commander.
Okay, one last question before we get into League of Explorers, just pertaining to pre-League of Explorers. With the previous two expansions, we've seen maybe one or two decks that have kind of come out from the new cards, which personally I think is maybe just less than we would hope for. What that means is a lot of the old decks, old powerful decks, like example mid-range druid, with the combo and handlock or face hunter, they seem to stick around for a long time, and could be one of the reasons why things kind of feel stale from time to time. I want to get your thoughts on just the last two expansions and the results of it. Has it been what you expected?
At least from a balance perspective, I think there are a lot of decks that come through with TGT specifically. We introduced dragons in BRM, and there were some dragon decks out there, but the pieces really didn't come fully together until TGT. So I mean, that's a deck that existed. Secret Paladin is obviously new. A lot of people are getting tired of that deck, but a lot of people are playing it. A lot of people like playing that deck. Yep. So a lot of people are playing it now, and when League of Explorers comes out, we'll see kind of what happens, because 45 new cards is a lot. It's more than we've ever done in any adventure. So I'm pretty happy with how things have turned out. the problem really with introducing like really high power level cards is they start to show up, and you're right, they do stick around forever. So if you make a card that's like, oh hey, it's the new expansion, let's make a bunch of super duper high power level cards, like maybe that's like a short term answer. It's like, oh wow, everything is new. But when you release a new set, those cards still exist. So you have to definitely like try to keep things even. Try to make it so, like these cards are showing up and people can put them in their decks and try to find the best situation for them, but you just don't want to give them like flat power level, like really strong cards and they always show up in every deck. I even think, even like in Ramp Druid, like you had mentioned, like there's Darnessus Aspirant, that there's new pieces, the decks are slightly different, and over time, when you give a deck like one piece at a time, like eventually those decks become a lot different. So I've been pretty happy overall, and I'm excited for League. So
okay, great. Well, enough. So that's all the questions I'm going to have for pre-League of Explorers. So let's talk about League of Explorers. Really excited for just the adventure itself. Seeing a lot of the animations, I think was really cool, like the rock rolling or the ceiling falling down, and even the map that comes on the board. Talk to us a little bit more about, I guess, what inspired you guys to do this particular theme, and maybe a little bit of the lore behind it.
There's definitely a couple different things going on. One is that we kind of like surprising players, so we didn't want to just do a dungeon like people were kind of expecting us to do, and so we wanted to break out and do like more of like a narrative, like an adventure-y types thing. And so here we hooked on this idea of the League of Explorers, which is in World of Warcraft, but it wasn't really fleshed out, and so we decided, let's take these some of these crazy adventurers, and kind of see what they do and how they can shake up the game. And so and also we're traveling around the world to different locations. That's kind of a little bit something new that we're trying. And then we also have the new keyword, discover. So, yeah.
Speaking of the new keyword, discover, I'll introduce a new mechanic, of course. Talk to us a little bit about the thinking behind adding this mechanic. It really has a lot to do with just drawing basically an extra card or adding an extra card to your deck.
Right. The most fun way to play Hearthstone for me is when you have a lot of interesting decisions to make. I think the problem with when you're adding lots of draw cards to the game, we saw in the past with things like Miracle Rogue, where when you draw your entire deck or a Freeze Mage, when you're drawing lots of cards, the games tend to play out very similar. And so we don't really want to get in a situation where you know exactly how the entire game is going to play out, like as soon as you queue into a deck. And so there are some decks out there that exist like that. So getting back to Discover, Discover is a cool way to add more decisions and have the games not play out like the same way. We had previously done that with cards like Unstable Portal and Web Spinner. This is a little bit different. Not only are you seeing stuff that you don't normally see in the normal flow of like ladder on Hearthstone, but you're gonna get like more of a consistent, power level of card. You're gonna be able to make the decision like, I could take this. It gives me something to play maybe next turn, but maybe you're in a control matchup and your deck doesn't have a lot of late game, and then you pull a beast or something from the Tomb Spider, and you have like King Crush or something like that. And you're like, maybe this is useful. Like maybe I take this and save it for later. So in playtesting, there's been a lot of crazy, interesting decisions to make, and a lot of cards that you're just like, oh wow, like I wouldn't have had the chance to play this otherwise. Right. So it's cool. I really enjoy it because of that. It's randomness, but there's a lot of choice and strategic value in like that kind of mechanic.
I noticed too, like in terms of the minions, that there's a cap to it. It's not like Web Spinner that you can literally get any kind of power leveled minion. So I really like that too. Let's see, from the standpoint of the cards that you made, were there any balance concerns that you had that you wanted to, or you guys wanted to rectify with this set of cards? Any particular one?
Not really. I think that we're always just looking to make new decks. Like, what kind of cards can we create that inspire people to create new decks? Because when you create new decks, then the meta shifts. New classes get played, new decks get played, and when new decks get played and new things are popular, that totally flips on its head, like what is powerful at that point. So I think you don't necessarily have to. If there's ever like a real problem that we consider like a balance problem, we've shown in the past that we will go in and we will rectify that problem. So right now, I don't really see that. I think that things are pretty good right now, and people are still trying to find answers to Secret Paladin, and I hope that there'll be more varied decks like going in through League of Explorers. But really, the goal is just how can we create new fun stuff for people to make, and I think that we've done that. I think there's a lot of cards out there that are going to inspire people to create decks that you've never really seen before, and the meta is going to change because of it.
Well, definitely agree with that. I can already think of a lot of different decks I want to try. With TGT, you introduced 2 new mechanics to us, with Inspire and Joust. But I noticed with this set, I didn't see any cards like really further, extending that, just using those mechanics. Is there any reason that you guys didn't add any cards that use that mechanic?
I think it's more a matter of like what makes sense for the flavor of the adventure. Like maybe it doesn't necessarily make sense in League of Explorers, but it's definitely something that we can revisit later if it's something we want to give more power, more consistency to add more Joust cards or things like that. But I think just for this particular case, it didn't really make sense to add more for those 2 keywords.
One thing that I did notice, or at least the theme that I did notice with some of the cards, was emphasizing Battlecry. It's something that you guys introduced last expansion with TGT, things with like crowd favor, for instance. And there's definitely, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but probably like 5 or 6 cards that get buffed or they have some additional value because of Battlecry. Tell me the thinking behind that.
I really like Rivendare. From Next. I think that turned out really, really cool. There's a lot of different, like, really awesome things that you can do with that. And I don't know if you looked in the collection, but there's a lot of minions with Battlecry and, like, crazy Battlecry effects. So we're always looking to, like, what's something crazy that you can do, and looking on past mechanics like Rivendare. It's like, oh, wow, that turned out really great. And we have Bronzebeard, and like, he's the guy that's really going to be a catalyst for those decks. Drawing 4 cards with Cold Light, healing for 16 with him, like a lot. And going back to Crowd Favorite, like Crowd Favorite's not really a card that saw a lot of play. Like the power level, I think in some people's mind was pretty low, but it's just about adding pieces over time. Every set, kind of adding pieces, like new things for this deck. And like I was talking about before, from BRM to TGT, like Dragon decks became more of a thing. And I think that over time you'll find that pieces will just get added slowly over time. And it'll be able to create a new cool deck. There'll definitely be a Battlecry deck. Definitely will happen. So I'm excited to see what class people end up thinking is the best for that. But in testing, there's definitely a Battlecry deck. So I'm excited.
So with a Battlecry, I think this is probably maybe the second or third time that we've experienced basically needing 2 expansions before a theme is really able to be executed by us players. One example would be Dragons. I think it took two expansions for that to really, for us to really see a Dragon deck in the metagame. Is that good? Is that something that we should be expecting, or what would make sense to me more is for you to to introduce something and just have a bunch of things that we could build a deck immediately with that theme. Is two expansions kind of a general way to get enough cards to be able to do that?
Or I can take it. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it is refinement as well. It's not. I don't think it's necessarily we're thinking. We're going to introduce this over 3 sets. It's about seeing it, evaluating it. What do people like about it? How good is this? Can people play it at the highest level? Is it fun for people to play at the lowest level? How many cards do you need really from each set in order to do this? So it's about evaluating that. And then when we're making the new set, it's like, maybe this needs a little bit more, and it's always certainly easier to add more than to then take away. So I think that when we go in and introduce a mechanic, we want people to play it. It's never that we're introducing a bunch of cards and we'll be like, well, we introduce cards, but we don't actually want anyone to play these until 2 sets later. That's not the goal. So with Dragon cards, I think that there was something there, and I think that deck was actually it was pretty good, but I don't think there was enough time to really figure out exactly what that deck was pre-TGT. So we added more, because Dragons are cool. So we'll continue to do that, and I would say that's not something that you should expect. I think that we're going to try to create new fun decks for that set. We're not saying hey, here's a bunch of cards and wait 2 expansions, but if something's really fun, we'll continue to refine it and we'll add more stuff.
Yeah, great. One thing, looking through the card set that was announced yesterday, I noticed some Well, at least personally, when looking at some of the classes, that some of the cards seem better in some of the classes than the others. Particularly, I really like the rogue cards. I like the shaman cards and one other class, priest cards, I believe. Were these classes you guys were looking at specifically to maybe add some cards like tempo rogue? I think how many people have been hoping for some type of controller tempo rogue, that sort of thing.
I can also take that. With Rogue,
I know that.
with Rogue, I think it's not I don't to me it's not really about like the power level as much as like how does Rogue play? Rogue's been playing the same way for a long time. You put Deadly and Tinkers and all the Rogue cards.
Yeah.
Like you just put all those cards in your deck and then maybe there's a little bit of variance. Have you seen a Death Rattle Rogue deck ever? So I mean, like when you introduce a card like that is like semi-high power level, people are gonna be like, oh, I think I want to build this Death Rattle deck. I want to put Nerubian eggs in my Rogue now, and you don't really see that ever before. So it's not really about like, oh, we think Rogue is a weak class, let's give it these strong cards. It's more like how does Rogue play? Like, does it play differently at all? Like Druid plays differently. Druid has a couple decks. Like Warlock has a few decks. Rogue doesn't necessarily have a lot of different ways to play. Like there is sort of like the milled gang up way to play. Less amount of people play that, but in general, just giving classes that don't have a lot of different ways to play different ways is sort of the goal. And I think Unearthed Raptor, like especially, like really captures that for Rogue.
Yeah, definitely. What are some of the styles that you're hoping to come from some of those classes? Like the Rogue, for instance, like that. The Raptor is, I think, a great card. I mean, I can think of that's the one that steals Death Rattle, I believe. Yeah, that's I can think of. Copies of Death Rattle of another minion. I can think of a lot of ways to use that. But in terms of, say, maybe Shaman with the one drop with that actually buffs with the overload. I mean, I've been wanting that sort of cards, introduce more of those type of cards. What are some of the things that you were looking at those classes?
I think we can both probably do this, but well, not particularly in Shaman, I guess. I think Tunnel Trog is just like a very strong card for the early game. I think it's something that Shaman was maybe missing a little bit. Shaman has trouble recovering once they lose board, so I think this card is gonna help them overcome that struggle. Like Zombie Chow's not always enough. So it's good, and I mean people are gonna use it, and there's a lot of really strong overload cards, and I think this sort of like I don't feel as bad about putting these overload cards in my deck now that I have this. But just in general, I think some of the neutral cards are going to inspire a lot of deck building from, basically everybody. Reno Jackson is a card that the text box is so unbelievably powerful. And it's great for me because people are like, oh, I actually really want to utilize that deck. And that deck doesn't exist ever anywhere. So I mean, no one plays the deck with like a single of every single card. There's some decks that are closer, but like with Reno Jackson in particular, I'll just kind of explain it. Is you can't have more than one of the same copy of a card in your deck when you play the card.
30 cards? Are you talking remaining deck? Or are you talking
remaining in the deck? Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So you can actually sort of like risk it. Like you can run Paladin with double mini bot and double muster because you really want two of those cards, but you have to draw them first. You have to draw at least one of them. So the risk reward is kind of cool there. But I think for the most part, especially with Reno, you're just going to see decks that you've never seen before. They're going to be like half this, half that, and you're going to be kind of thinking with any deck when you're playing it. It's like I haven't seen him play 2 copies of any card yet. Is this guy about to heal to full on turn 7? So I think that's kind of going to be a cool tension to have and just inspire a lot of cool decks. So I'm excited for that one. I don't know.
So with Reno Jackson, I mean, personally, I think I'm going to have to be using Deck Tracker a lot more. So do you anticipate people having to write down all the cards, I guess, and just to be able to use that card? Because I think that card's really powerful. And again, like I think it might inspire some more control-oriented decks or maybe even some combo-oriented decks. But is there any tools that you guys might be adding in the future, like with maybe overlays and that sort of thing?
There's currently no plans to do anything like that. I mean, kind of what we're trying to do with Hearthstone is, since the beginning, is really make it approachable for new players. And so adding new things to the user interface we take very seriously. So if there's things that make sense, for sure, we will take a look at those. But it's kind of like a push and pull of like, what do we provide to keep our older players, excited about the game and giving them tools to be successful, and also like how do we keep from just making it overwhelming for new players. So that's kind of where we're at on that.
What's your favorite card in this new expansion?
Man, I feel like I'm kind of saying this over and over again, but Reno's my favorite card. Like from not only like game design perspective, I'm really excited for people to play it, but it's been really exciting for me to play too. I think it's kind of one where you can just take like, what's your favorite class? What do you like to play the most? What are you most comfortable with? It's like, all right, how can I fit Reno in that deck? Yeah. So it's not just like for one type of deck it's good for. So I think you can just find what you're most comfortable with and really just find a way to put Reno in your deck. And he's going to inspire all kinds of new stuff, and people are going to be arguing about like, oh no, this Reno deck is the best, or this Reno deck is the best. So that's really cool for me.
For me personally, I play a lot of super gimmicky decks because I'm not like super competitive. So Brand Bronzebeard is pretty interesting to me for the double Battlecry, because I play a Warrior Iron Juggernaut deck, and then I also play a Mill Rogue with cold light, lots of cold light action. So I'm kind of curious to see how that works out. So yeah.
We don't have too much time left, so I wanted to make sure I get like at least one Arena question in. With Arena, I think it's been clear that there have been, the Mage, Paladin, Rogue, right on top of that, just the power rankings. Warrior's been at the bottom, and I noticed some of the cards that you added are going to help Warrior, at least in terms of Arena. Let me know, or can you talk about some of the things that you guys were looking at with this expansion in terms of Arena?
Well, like you said, recognizing the Warrior is a very low-played class in Arena. Introducing like more common cards because commons show up more in Arena. So introducing high power level common cards for Arena is, that's going to be a way to change that. I think with Warrior specifically, the hero power is pretty weak in general. Just for the Arena gameplay, it's probably the worst hero power for Arena. So I think just from that perspective, Warrior is always going to be kind of a step behind, unless their cards are much more powerful, which it isn't likely to be the case. But I think the message you get across is we want the same thing that everyone else wants. That you want to queue in and you don't want to see Mage over and over again. You don't want to see Paladin over and over again. So as far as introducing new cards over time, we're taking steps in that direction of where let's give Warriors some more powerful commons, because really it doesn't affect the constructed game too much to give Warriors some high power level commons for Arena. We can do that. We have the power to do that. So it's something that we recognize, and we're always like, I don't really have anything to talk about right now outside of introducing like higher power level commons for classes like Warrior, or maybe not doing that for Paladin or Mage. But it's something that we realize we want that. We want a varied experience, not only in Arena, but in all of our formats. So it's something that we realize. It's something that we talk about. There are many solutions, so it's just about finding the right one and the right timing for it. But it's something that we realize it's definitely not being ignored. I play a ton of Arena. Brode plays a ton of Arena. Dodds plays a ton of Arena. Danae plays so much Arena. Yeah. So all of us are really passionate about that, and it doesn't just go by the wayside at all. Like, we all really care. Something that we think about. We're thinking about solutions for it.
That's definitely good to hear. Because there's been a lot of, some of the folks, at least outspoken folks from Arena, I think have had some concerns recently. No, but in terms of releases, this being the adventure, and I don't want to look too much forward because we haven't even gotten a chance to expand it or really experience the new expansion or the new adventure mode. But are we going to be doing expansion adventure for 2016?
I think that's kind of been the format in the past, but I think it's more about like what works for the community. We want to release new cards for the players, but we don't want to like flood the game with too many cards to overwhelm people. So I think it's worked so far, but we're constantly reevaluating to see like what's the best way to get content into the players' hands. So we'll see going forward.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to be it for our interview. So I want to thank you guys for doing it, and I look forward to again. Yeah.